Hello, everyone. Welcome to EVA's webinar today about LMS and virtual event platform integrations. We're really excited about this topic. But before we begin, just to give some time for everyone to join us, a few housekeeping things as you're all accustomed to when joining these webinars. This session has been approved for CMP and CAE credits. So if you stay on with us for the entire time, we'll make sure to, if you're a CAE, give you that attendance certificate by email, as well as import your information into the Event Industry Council's database to claim your CMP. If you have any questions about that process, definitely put it in the chat box or email us and contact us later, but give us a couple of days to process all that information because we also want to send you the recording of today's session. You'll get the recording, the slides, and any other supporting materials that we think that might be helpful to you. So that will be on your way probably early next week. So just be patient with us while we get those things ready for you. The other thing is we are using webinar today, so everyone will be muted. But if you have questions, we love questions. So put that in the chat box or in the Q&A section. I'll try to get to them as soon as I see them, or if it's a good time, we'll definitely have time at the end to address any of your questions. Or if you have stories to tell, I'd love to see those in the chat. Now, before we begin, we do have a couple of poll questions. We like poll questions because it gives us an idea who's joining us today. So I am joined by our very handy Alexis Smith, who is our virtual coordinator for today. Hi, Alexis. Can you throw up poll number 1? This one, we want to just know if you are considering an integration. Where are you in that process? Are you just beginning? Have you definitely made the decision that you're going to integrate? Or you're just not quite sure, and that's why you're here today? And then we'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. But while you're doing that, I want to introduce Matt Peterson. Matt has come from the hospitality and association industry and knows exactly what his associations are up to, what are they looking for when it comes to conference content and education. And he is with MapleLMS and will be sharing his knowledge about this integration process in the industry. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Vinnu. I appreciate it. I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, much of my experience has been in events, and I kind of moved over to the education side. So this is an exciting topic for me because I kind of come from both backgrounds, and we're going to talk about where those two industries meet.
Great. Alexis, if you don't mind, let's share the results of this poll. It seems like most of you are kind of figuring out, you're in somewhere on the path to integration and figuring out what that is. So great. I'm glad you've joined us. We've got some great talking points today. Alexis, let's do the second one, second poll, which here is just going to ask you what you're hoping to, what your benefits are that you're hoping to get out of an integration. And if you don't know, that's okay. That's part of what we're here, but just kind of help us understand what you're looking for in an integration. So Matt, this topic is really of interest to me. On the virtual platform side, we see a lot of great content being generated and recorded. And the natural question that a lot of our clients are asking us is, okay, we have recordings, we want people to see this. How long can we keep it on the platform? And each platform has its own longevity that that offers to clients, and it's really custom to each different association, each different event. But what we're finding a lot right now is that the content. The question is the content really going to live beyond those dates of the conference, right? And I think a lot of associations are thinking about that. What are you hearing from your association fellows out there?
Well, I think we have to back up and just say, we've seen growth in both of our industries, right? The virtual event industry as well as the e-learning industry since the beginning of the pandemic. So even just from the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020 to April 2020, Google's search volume for online courses increased by more than 100% across the globe. So people are definitely interested in it. We're sending our students to learn remotely, and everyone's working remotely. And so this really fueled some massive growth. So the worldwide e-learning market is expected to be worth $325 billion by 2025, which means that it's nearly doubled in size over the last decade from 165 billion in 2015. And interest in e-learning is skyrocketing, and so is revenue along with that. So it's highly likely that if you're with an association that your members are looking for professional development and e-learning courses from your organization, since you are considered to be an expert in your field. So this interest is also fueling advancements in both the virtual conference platforms and the LMS market. Many things that we've been focused on with our development is including more engaging content and using artificial intelligence to aid in suggested learning paths and recommended courses. And at MapleLMS, we also have a powerful online assessment tool that is an AI proctor to administer high stakes exams remotely. So if you have those certification designations that need to be a proctored exam, we can also handle that remotely, and people can take an exam from the comfort of their own home, but also we can prevent them from cheating. So with more people working remotely, there's also a need to train and develop the workforce remotely. And I feel like learning management software is meeting that need. And I feel like the virtual conference content, and there's so much being recorded, really has a place in an LMS to help that process and to help people learn remotely.
Now, I think the question in the industry right now for associations is not if the technology can do it. The technology definitely can. And I think what's happening now, associations are really thinking, okay, we've kind of worked in two different silos. We've had our conference content go this way and our LMS education, CE kind of stuff go this way. Now, how do we bridge these two? And I think that conversation's been happening for a long time. But I think with the pandemic and now going virtual, a lot of people can see a little bit more, understand the technology of how that can actually work together, which is pretty exciting. Alexis, why don't we throw up share the results from the polls, because it's really interesting, I think. For those of you that participated, that you're interested, seems like you guys are all interested in everything, all the benefits, which is great. And, I think the unified experience is spot on, right? That's kind of where we're all starting from, because in reality, in the real world, we see that, right? When we go to like shop on Amazon or go to Netflix, we're logging in with just one password. We may log into our Google Gmail account, and that gives us access to everything. And that experience is something that our members are looking for, right? So we want to be able to give that to them, and the technology's there. Now we saw what you guys out there are looking for as benefits, but Matt, can you talk to us a little bit about what are you hearing that associations, why did they want to integrate?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you brought up the first one. You have all this conference content, and what do you do with it after? And I think you have to really ask yourself, does this have longevity in an LMS, or is it should expire at the end of the conference, or 120 days after the conference? But many people will find that can be developed into a learning path based on the role or the profession of your user. And so there's a place for it in the LMS. So I think, addressing that where the content can be viewed and really live on forever. So you have to ask yourself, is it going to be relevant, and does it make sense to put it into our LMS? So extending the conference content is certainly important. And then we can also track CEU credits. So if someone's earning CEU credits for attending your conference, that can easily be integrated so it records that in their transcript, which could be viewed in the LMS. It could be viewed in also an AMS if the association is using an association management system. So those are kind of really the two main use cases. And then the analytics that go with that. CEU credits is just one, but you can get reporting and analytics on what type of content is resonating with your members. And that kind of data and analytics can then be used to create more content. What are your users looking for? So you can use that data to then maybe fill out your agenda for your upcoming conference, or think about additional courses that you might want to offer in your LMS.
And I think, part of this integration process and thinking of it is understanding what the two systems do. So thank you for walking us through, like, what can you do in an LMS? And as you guys can see here on for virtual platforms, that what you can do there and then what you can do together. I think that's kind of the first step of just understanding what are the capabilities of each platform and how does it work. I mean, for me, the way I look at it is the big difference is about timing, right? Conference platforms are for a defined period of time, and that can affect your content, and LMS kind of live on for as long as it makes sense for that content. But let's take a look at some of the differences too, and understanding what is it that a virtual platform can do, and what is it that an LMS can do. On the virtual platform side, it's all about that real-time engagement, whether it's hybrid, in-person, face-to-face, all those different combinations. Most of these platforms will offer you the opportunity to network real-time, whether that's through video or text chat. There's the matchmaking, appointment setting elements. It's all of those things that can happen in real time. Now, can some of those things happen in an LMS almost like in a school format? Absolutely. Matt, can you talk to us a little bit about that? What makes an LMS different from an event platform?
Yeah, I think in its simplest form, LMS, or a learning management system, is a software that organizes your content. You can use it to develop content, deliver and track training and education. And that may be for employees, members, clients, partners, volunteers. Another great feature of MapleLMS is we offer an e-commerce feature, which allows you to sell your educational content directly in the LMS. And you can also sell awards, certificates, and certifications. We also touched upon exams and proctored exams. We can also handle that. So if there's any type of feature like that. Also in curating the content and creating it, we have a lot of multimedia content tools. So you can make pretty slick presentations from taking the conference content and then maybe overlaying it with some interactive tools to make it more engaging for your members. So I think actually the similarities are greater than the differences, but as you mentioned, the main difference will be the point in time. We also have great engagement tools for social learning, like forums and chat features that people can also use. So there's I would say the similarities are probably greater than the differences.
Matt, we're getting some questions specifically around CAEs, and I think this is either the root of why a lot of people use LMS is to track those CEs, right? In terms of just who's taking them, what's the progress, and all the data that goes behind it. But it's, if you've got a good CE program, you're tracking more than one at a time. So is that, every LMS system is a little bit different, and you've got to ask that question. But for Maple, Matt, can you guys track multiple CEs at a time?
Absolutely. You can put in an unlimited amount of type of CE credits that your organization may issue. And then likewise, within a course, you can offer multiple CE credits, different types of credits. Like, for instance, this webinar is CAE and CMP certified. So you could offer credits in both of those designations.
That's great. And again, it's all about the technology that you're using with the platform you're on. So it's definitely worth asking the question. Now, Matt, let's talk about considerations about things that associations need to think about before they go through. Actually, before we do that, you have a great slide, and I don't want to skip this one. This is about within integration, you can make a lot of money out of it, right? It's not only about driving your educational mission of educating your industry, but it's also about driving that non-dues revenue that pays everyone's salaries, that pays for the platform, but keeps your organization running. Can you talk to us a little bit about this piece of it? How does this integration make money for an organization?
Sure. When we talk about the benefits of integrating, I see it as 5 key points. But as we saw from our poll, many people are interested in increasing their non-dues revenue with their educational content. So selling your conference and educational content can lead to significant increases in your non-dues revenues for your organization, and it will often pay for itself time and time again. So I encourage organizations to try different pricing models to see what works best for your members and your organization. And there's so many different ways to price things in our e-commerce system. You can bundle courses. You could sell a subscription fee to the LMS, either on a quarterly, monthly, or annual basis. I've also seen some of our customers sell a certification. So you're buying the certification and then you include all the course content for free. In the simplest form, I think it's important to have one price for members and one price for non-members. So many of our customers will do that. And sometimes the member content may be free or significantly discounted from the non-member price. The other nice thing is you could offer a discount on future courses. So if you have maybe a new buyer that came in through the conference platform and they decided to take some on-demand content from that and purchase it, you could maybe offer a discount on a future course that you would recommend for them to entice them to purchase more and to return to your LMS. But really the non-dues revenue portion is just one benefit of the integration. It really increases user engagement. So I would say that's like a second benefit. The virtual conference is obviously engagement for a specific period of time, whereas the LMS is going to provide you engagement for 365 days a year. I briefly mentioned the social learning and forums that people can join when they join the LMS to keep engaged with other users and even with instructors or speakers that are featured in the conference content or the educational content. We also have great gamification features to keep people engaged as well. They can earn badges based on their activities in the LMS and what they're completing. And we all know member engagement leads to more satisfied members who are more likely to renew their membership. So we hear a lot that people want to increase their user engagement. A third benefit I'd like to highlight is the integrated analytics. So you can have all that transfer 2 ways. So you can pull any number of reports. You can even customize a report based on what your customers or users are doing in your LMS, what content they're viewing, what content resonates with them. So you can track member and non-member engagement and really figure out what the behaviors are when they're in the LMS. So analytics then can help curate content, as I mentioned, based on what's resonating with your members. You can create additional content or maybe even go to your next conference and suggest a certain topic to be discussed that's resonating with your members. And you can also survey them. So you can ask them point blank, what do you want to see? Did you like this course? Did it keep you engaged? What else do you want to see? And so we have survey features in the LMS that are really beneficial, and then those are automatically combined into a report that would be useful to the organization. The other thing is we can send notifications to learners based upon what they like. So that's kind of where the AI information comes in and learning paths. So based on if someone really liked the course, the LMS can automatically send a notification, hey, I think you'd really like this course since you like this, or this may be appropriate for your learning path. Um, and then I would say a fourth benefit is the unified user experience. So a single sign-on that you kind of hinted to earlier, Vinnu, where if they're logged into one system, they're automatically logged into the other one. They just hit a link and they don't need to log out of one system and log into another. And this is going to drive more traffic, right, to your LMS or to your conference content. We talked about the curated learning paths, so those could be based on a role or a certain profession. So that really makes it feel like the user is really getting suggestions from the LMS itself based on their role or profession. And then we can also brand the LMS. We do a white label solution with the LMS so that people can have the organization's look and feel, the colors, their font they like to use, their images that they like to use to really make it feel cohesive to the user. And then I would say a final benefit of integrating is the tracking of the sort of certifications. It really consolidates it in all one central location to create efficient management. So users can actually go and print their own certification out. Once they completed the required activities, that's automatically logged into their user profile. And that can be also integrated into an AMS. So you could also just log into an AMS and be able to see your user profiles and who has what in terms of certifications, or you can aggregate that data to create a report from it. So that is really kind of what the main benefits are, but I know people love to hear about the non-dues revenue, and there's a lot of different ways to go with that. And many of our clients have seen a significant increase in their non-dues revenue when they adopted our LMS.
Matt, you went over so many great benefits, and what I like about these benefits too is that you don't have to do them. You don't have to want it all, and you can prioritize what benefits are important for your organization, as well as you don't have to do everything at once, right? Take it in phases as well, and that kind of leads to the next part of our discussion, and preparing for this integration. And what does that kind of checklist look like? And you've put together a really great checklist for us, and thinking about this integration. And even before you get to this checklist, and we talked a little bit about looking at the content. We often, I think in the last couple of years, there's been such a hurry to just, move from having the need to move from an in-person event to a virtual event. And there's no time to redo the content, redo the structure. It was simply, let's just copy and paste, right? And that was out of necessity, and that's okay. We all learned a lot from that. But now I think associations are really thinking about, okay, is this the right fit? What kind of content are we giving to people in person, online, hybrid? What are those experiences like? And then that conversation is leading to what is the experience in an LMS? A lot of times when people talk about integration, they're thinking, oh, can the video just go from one to another? Can that migration happen easily? Every platform is different. Some offer that capability, and that's great if that's your priority. But my point here is to try to figure out what things are really important to you and to the organization and across different departments. Right. I know as a meeting planner, my objective would be, those that missed it, let's get that content out to them. But membership may have a different value set. Their goal is, how can I add value to membership so that people renew their membership, as well as attract new members. But then the education department, their mission is what content really truly qualifies for a CE, and how long can that live? I know we all are challenged with time, and creating content is expensive, it's time consuming. So we want to stretch it as long as we can. And I think that's been a big motivational driver for associations, is that we are spending so much money on conferences. Again, it doesn't matter what kind of medium, but how do we capture that and get a greater ROI for that content? So really thinking through from a content standpoint, does it make sense? and what's that longevity? And then thinking, okay, once you know what you're going through in terms of what your objectives are, what you're trying to gain, what are some of the features you want, then looking at platforms that make sense to integrate together. I will say probably 90% of the platforms out there, both virtual and LMS, can do some sort of integration, because at the end of the day, it's all technology and data that's moving between each other. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how and what platform that can do that. So with this integration checklist, what I like about it is that it does kind of walk us through some of those things we want to think about before we press the button, say integrate. I wish things were that easy. It's not. And especially with something when you're talking about so much data and data security and all of that. So thinking about, I like the data. I became an accidental techie because of the data. The data is just so intriguing to me because of the stories it can tell. So one of the things I like to tell people is don't tell me what fields you want to bring over. Tell me what story you want to hear. What is it that you want to learn from the data? And then work backwards at, because that's going to be your starting point. It's very easy to say, give me everything. But if you look at all the data that you're collecting in a virtual platform, you're collecting number of visits to a website, you're collecting polls and surveys and how many times people are connecting with one another, all great data, right? But the question here is, how does that data connect to the data that you're pulling in from the LMS? What's the connection points and stories you want to tell? Some great examples are, well, I want to know what my non-members, what they're seeing at a virtual conference and what they're doing in the LMS in terms of tracks. Are they wanting the same kind of knowledge? And if there is that synergy, how can I use that to entice them to become members or to curate that content going forward? So really looking at those different points. Now, Matt, from an LMS standpoint, talk about some of those data points that you're capturing in LMS.
Yeah, we're capturing a lot. We're capturing all the movement of the users. So we can see exactly which courses they completed. If they haven't completed the course, we can see what percentage of the course they completed. We basically, you have a transcript, just like if you can think back into college where you had a transcript in all your courses. If there was a grade assigned to it, that would also follow the data. If there was a survey that we offered to our learners to survey the course, that data could also be transferred over. And we talked about kind of the CE credits and the certifications would also carry over. So those are some of the key data points that that we're gathering, and you can determine which ones are most important to them and what reporting capabilities you want with that data.
Now, Matt, I was just kind of chuckling in my head because I was thinking of a recent integration story where we, on the event platform side, was integrating with an AMS. And this client wanted to bring in as much information as possible in terms of like biographical information from their AMS, because that was their system of record. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to use the event platform as an opportunity to update that information. Great, right? Like that's definitely, that was a goal of theirs. That's what they wanted to do. So great. We pulled in all of that information, like hobbies and what school do your kids go to and all that kind of stuff, right? You know, just in their profile. And then in the event platform, they can go in, they update all that information, and it syncs back to the AMS. That's collecting data, getting update data serves a purpose. That is very different than what we're talking about in the integration. Just because you're collecting all of that data does not mean that it should all be synced together with an integration with LMS, because the data that you want to get from the LMS is different. Again, it goes back to that purpose. If you're updating profiles, no problem, can do it, great idea. But when your goal is to integrate the data to tell you a story about what your members, non-members are doing, seeing, then some of that biographical data may not be relevant. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind. Because again, it goes to, there's so much data out there, right? You can pull a report on anything, but really fine tuning what that story is definitely probably one of the first steps you go to. Now the next steps. I love talking about field mapping, and my developers laugh at me all the time. I'm like, oh, just marry them up. First name, F name, that goes together, and it's that easy. And they look at me and they laugh. Yeah, it's that easy. A little bit more complicated. I know my first foray into field mapping was, and I was exporting spreadsheets from 2 different systems, and having field names, they're very similar, but they're even, the name of the columns were different. So for example, I just mentioned first name or F name, and just making sure that they're matching to each other. Another common, like really easy one to get tripped on is mailing address and billing address. If you just make sure that you're matching the right fields to the right ones, but it's just not only the name, right? It is also about the format of the fields. One I like to use a lot is states. States is a notorious one that I'm always looking at going, oh gosh, okay, why can't we just all agree on one way to do it? But everybody has a different reason for capturing the data the way they do. So back to states. So in one system, you may have the full name of a state. So let's say Kentucky, my good old Kentucky home, where you spell out the word Kentucky. But in another system, you may use the abbreviation KY. So when you're trying to integrate that data together, and if you're trying to try to push over the full name into a field that only accepts abbreviation, you're going to get an error. Not a difficult problem, right? But it is kind of a bug that comes up. So thinking about some of those things and before you go into an integration will make that integration process that much easier. So put down your fields that you want to collect, the names, how do they match, and definitely make sure you think about how the formatting of that field is. Let's go on to security. I know Matt and I talk a lot about what we want to keep safe. Matt, what data do you want people not to see?
Yeah, I think when it comes to personal identifiable information, you want to bring over as little as necessary to the LMS. Just think about what's needed. So for many of our clients, that's just first and last name and maybe email address. And sometimes you also have the role or their title involved with what information they're going to be able to see or access based on the profession of the person. So those are usually the key points. We usually don't need the address. We don't need social security numbers. We don't need credit card numbers. So keep that information, and most of organizations will have that information live in their AMS, or their association management software.
Yeah, and with this piece, one of the valuable lessons I've learned along this process is once you've identified which is the foundational enterprise or your system, which is most likely either an AMS or your registration system that you're using. But once you've figured out in your organization, that's the official record is going to lie. Your organization has probably already gone through a pretty in-depth security analysis of how to keep that data safe, what should go in, what should come out. And that's a great place to start, right? Because you've got all those security systems in place. It's been audited. It's a great place to start. A lot of us think of integration as just being SSO, which is fine, right? And this speaks a lot to that. So whether it's the event platform, the LMS, if there's that one landing page that says login, where is that going? Most of the time it's going to validate and verify account information from your AMS system is what I recommend, because it is secure. And Matt, thank you for saying about, try to keep only the information you really need and not bringing over more than you need. And again, it goes back to what is the purpose and what type of information is coming over. But definitely look at some of those security measures, what your platforms are offering, and make sure that's in line with your own security policies for your organization. Michael has a very good question here that's about, do we complement EU privacy rules? And definitely, like GDPR compliance, EU policies are all top of mind for all of us, especially in the tech world. So those are definitely good questions that you want to ask your platforms, like how are they compliant? Take a look at, ask them where their servers are. How secure are their servers? What's going on there? But so we talked a little bit of SSL, talked about privacy, but also looking at that flow. So I just mentioned 4 different platforms, right? AMS, your registration system, your virtual platform, and your LMS. They all have 4 different logins, but with the SSO, you're combining that into one login, giving that validation to all those systems. But understanding how that flow goes is really important. Making sure that that flow is described and you know where the verifications are coming from, and making sure that's the user experience you want. On paper, it seems really easy, right? Log in here, and that's into that login can reside on each different platform, right? But it's verifying on the back end. Nobody other than the techies and us know that in the back end, it's sending information over to your AMS, say, is this a real person? And can they use this password? Are they allowed into our system? But understanding that and understanding how the data actually goes into the system, if it's encrypted, does it need to be encrypted? Those are definitely questions you want to ask, and also know what you expect as an organization. Make sure it's in line with your own policies internally. Now we've talked about getting the data, validating, and now about the data syncing. And, you know, there's a lot of data. We talked a little bit about all the polls and surveys and all the engagement information that you're collecting for your virtual platform. Does that make sense to put it into your LMS or in an integration? Again, it goes back to what information is it what story is it that you want to tell? Do you want to say, you know, everyone who attended a certain track in the virtual conference, did they, you know, how are they interacting with that track in LMS? That's a great comparison to see. That's going to tell you a lot about how that track is doing. Is that something you should curate more of or offer more of? But those kind of thinking of how that data gets all synced and where it's going. We talked about flow a little bit, about the API workflow, but each technology is going to be a little different out there. Everyone's going to have their own field names and how that flow works. So actually working through that before you press the button integrate is definitely going to be important. Reports and dashboards. You're going to have your reports in your virtual, you're going to have your reports in your LMS. Now determine what reports do you want together. That's bringing that information together and that visibility. Having that is part of your story, right? You have a story that's being told. These are reports and dashboards are going to help you tell that story. And then data cleansing, everybody's favorite thing. It's housekeeping, right? It has to be done. So think about that before you do the integration. You know, how often should it be cleaned? Where is it being cleaned? How is it being synced back? All of that. You know, one great example I'll give you is that this is very much in the meeting space, right? Like people create their membership profile. It's synced with their event registration, and then it syncs into the virtual platform. And it's all synced, right? And this is all user input. And let's say someone misspells their name. And I love the stories where people come on site and say, oh, my name badge is printed wrong. You did it wrong. It's like, well, that's what you put in. Of course, we can't say that. We're like, no problem. We'll print you a new badge. With the online experience, it's like, no problem. Edit your profile and you're good to go. But those kind of things, if you're updating data in your AMS and that's what's being synced across your platforms, talk to your vendor suppliers, your technology partners, about how that information is being updated. Is it being updated real time, or is the information being pulled on a schedule and how often? Just so that you can set the expectation within your organization and with your members or your people that are engaged, so you can explain how that's going. And then we talk a little bit, the last piece of it before you press that button again is the user type and data access mapping. So this is where you may not want everybody to have access to everything, right? There's certain types of members get certain types of access to certain types of classes. Matt, you talked a lot about that custom journey for members or non-members or learners on the system, right? And that goes to a lot of that of like figuring out who gets access to what kind of roles are those, and defining that process as well. Mm-hmm. Matt, did I miss anything on the checklist?
No, I think you really covered it very well. Those are the kind of the key things to think about, I think, before you go ahead and pursue an integration. Those are the key points.
Yeah. Now there's a lot that goes also into the actual integration and post-integration. And we're not going to cover that today because we didn't want to rush through this piece of it, but you should definitely join us in our next webinar in April that will go into more detail about that piece. So that is coming up. But if you have any questions, definitely put those in the chat or in the Q&A and we'll get to those. We're not quite done yet, but I wanted to make sure I reminded you that we're definitely open to questions for you. Let's see here. Matt, in terms of, we do have one question here from Michael. He's asking about, the assistance for the platform, for the level of tech support. I know every platform is different out there in terms of how much they provide you right off the bat. Do they charge you extra? How does Maple handle tech support?
Yeah, now we're here to hold your hand, and we'll guide you through the whole integration process as well as configuring the system to make sure that it's going to be the best for your needs and the most efficient. Now, when we talk about integration, though, you need to get your vendors involved. So we would obviously handle the LMS side, but we would need to have access to some of the fields and things in the alternate system. So once you're ready to get started on that, engage your vendors in that conversation and get them involved in the integration path. And if they can't offer the full level of support, there are also third parties that you can also get involved. So if you don't have a large staff on your association and don't really have a tech person, there's people to help out with that. But we're here to customize and make sure the correct fields are carried over into the LMS.
And I'm glad you brought in the concept of the conversation about capacity, right? Especially in these days when associations are lean, right, in terms of staffing and also just kind of work area, right? A lot of people are still remote, and whether that helps things move faster or slower, or you just have to think about collaboration more. I think capacity is something that we all deal with, and definitely something you want to consider in that pre-integration checklist of figuring out what skill sets do you have on your staff, what people do you have, and what else is on their plate, right? Like if they've already got a lot, and this is it kind of adapting your integration plan to that. there's nothing wrong with just doing an SSO to begin with, like in taking this integration in phases. Do step one, do SSO, and then think about what comes next. Because not all of this has to be done at once. And I think it's more important to have a successful integration that doesn't overwhelm staff, that gives a good experience to your users, because at the end of the day, that's part of the goal, right? Is to create this unified, seamless, one experience for everybody to have when they're logging in and engaged with the organization. So that's definitely, that needs to be top of mind as well. Matt, a couple of other questions here. So I have two different vendors for LMS and virtual conference. You know, in terms of staffing, do I need to have that staff in-house? Or, you know, you talked a little bit about how you guys help out, but what are some other resources that people can tap into? Is it something that you do recommend in-house staffing?
Yeah, I think you need to have that conversation internally first. You know, who has the bandwidth to devote to this. You certainly need a project manager of some sort on your side, someone that's going to keep it together. So, do you have someone on your staff that could manage that project? And you talked about starting slow, and I love that concept. Walk first, then run. I tell a lot of my clients, you know, you can do these bit by bit. And our software is so rich in features that you don't need to use everything right outside the gate. You know, you can learn them. And as you're in the system more and more, you're going to see what those capabilities are and how they can be best utilized. But you need to have an honest conversation within your organization of who's available to oversee everything. But then, like I said, really get that conversation going with your two vendors, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what's going to be required and what's needed. So many of the benefits of the integration will come down the road. And, you know, it's a lot of work in the beginning, I will say, to get your content loaded, to create content, get your users synced, create learning paths, create your surveys, your quizzes, your exams. Some of that can be a lot of heavy on the front end, but the beauty of it is once it's created, it's done, or maybe you just need to go in and edit it every once in a while. So you're reaping the benefits of all that for a long time to come after that initial stage of getting everything set up. And then your organization is really, really going to love life, because you're going to see so many efficiencies, you're going to see effectiveness, you're going to see redundancies removed, you're going to see mistakes in the system removed, because everything is syncing and there's so much automation that happens without personal involvement in it. So I would say those are kind of the key points. Talk internally, who has the bandwidth, and then really talk to your vendors about what's going to be required.
You know, and I also like about the association spaces, there are a lot of great consultants that specialize in LMS, that specialize in technology. They can be tapped into not only from a strategic standpoint, but from like almost like a managed service standpoint, where they can actually, you know, you've got the goal, you've got the vision, you just actually need someone to implement that and make it happen. And so there are a lot of different partners out there that with association experience, they get it, that can be that support for you. So definitely something worth taking a look at. Matt, one more question here in terms, because I know a lot of times LMS is used for CE management. That it needs to reside somewhere, whether it's an external system or in an LMS. How are you handling, you know, are you seeing that virtual conference platforms are managing it? Is it managed in LMS? How does that all come together? Can you bring credits over from one system to another just to be tracking?
Yeah, the most common integration I would see in that standpoint is using an AMS or in some cases a CRN. That's your system of records. So it's good to have those CE credits appear in the profile in an AMS or a CRM. So that's really a good integration to have. But that information will always reside in your LMS. So you can always switch back to your LMS and see a full profile. And you can aggregate those into a report too. So if you just need to see, how many CE credits were gained in the last month from all of my educational content, you could create a report that would tell you that. So that's what I really suggest. But if you have a system of records, be it an AMS or a CRM, you probably want an integration with your LMS there too, so that you can see a full profile of what your users and learners are doing in the system.
Right. Well, Matt, thank you so much. It's been great to have you here and talk about, we usually live in two different worlds, so it's great to talk about when we bring these worlds together, what can happen, and talking about really maximizing the technology that's out there and where we can go. I do think this is an exciting time for associations to really push the boundaries and to tap into all of that. So I appreciate your time here. Any last words of wisdoms or thoughts you'd like to share with us?
One other thing that I kind of thought about, just as we talked about conference content, and I know many associations are struggling with offering value to their sponsors or exhibitors. If you carry that content over into your LMS, you can also run analytics on that of who's viewing it. So if your exhibitors or sponsors are featured in a keynote entrance, or maybe they're even featured as a speaker at your conference content, you can sell that as a benefit to your sponsors and exhibitors moving forward. You can say, hey, at our last conference, yeah, we may have had 500 attendees, but look, we had 3,000 views on this after the fact. So that's another good point there. And I would say, if the integration doesn't make sense to you, at least take a step back and see if some of your conference content should at least be uploaded into your LMS, because you can certainly do that on a manual basis without integrating. And I think there's so much content being recorded right now with virtual and hybrid conferences that it would be a shame not to offer those on an on-demand, ongoing basis to your members and non-members and produce some of that non-dues revenue. But thank you, Vinnu, so much for having me. I get so excited about this topic, and in particular, like I said, the convergence of education with virtual conferences. So thank you for including me.
Well, thank you, Matt. For everyone that's joined us today, thank you so much for joining us. We hope the content was helpful, and we'll encourage you to have conversations within your own organizations about whether integration is right, and how to go about doing it, and doing it in a way that it makes not only sense for your capacity, but also how your organization can truly benefit from it, and benefit your members and non-members as well. Just as a reminder, we will send you a recording of today's session, as well as the slides, and also send you your certificate of attendance. Thank you for sticking with us today. In the meantime, I'd like to throw up the last slide here. If you have any questions or want to learn more about Maple or EVA, or even both of us together, we're happy to, we love talking to people. So definitely reach out to us. We'd love to set up some time, answer your questions, and explore how this is how an integration can work out for you. We've enjoyed having you. Hope you can join us for our next webinar in April for the second part of this, where we'll get a little bit dirtier with the actual integration and talk shop there. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. We've enjoyed this time, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you all.